welcome to Stephan Thelen's interview. A lot of you have asked to feature him on the site, and for some reason, even though he and I have a lot of mutual connections, he and I have never actually spoken before. So this is our first actual conversation. Stephan, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you for having me, Anthony.
Excellent. So a lot of people who know about you, they say that you're a mathematician, that you are a minimalist composer, and you do a lot of exploratory looping, sound exploration, and that kind of like a lot of ambient stuff. And I know you've worked with a lot of interesting artists. Where do you start when when people want to know what you do, who you are, how you approach music? Where do you start?
Well, it's difficult to say because I keep evolving. I'm doing different things all the time, and I think why we connect is because I was a huge King Crimson fan in the 70s. I remember when I was 14, there was Starless and Bible Black came out, so I went to a shop and bought that record. And it really changed my life. The intensity of the music really blew me away. And for many years, I was a huge Fripp fan. And I was thinking of you actually. I'm probably the second person on this planet who played Fractal, because the minute it came out, I tried to learn it. And I mean, I didn't succeed completely. I didn't know every note, and I couldn't play it in that tempo, but I pretty much had it together. So that was 1974 or 75. So it's very possible that I was the second person on the planet.
Were you an aficionado of Robert's technique, or did you just come to? Oh, you were. Okay.
Yeah. I also the 80s Crimson, which didn't have a big impact on me as the 70s Crimson, but I still loved, the guitar playing, and I learned all the stuff. And so when I first went to a guitar-craft course, I already had the technique. I had all this, maybe not perfectly, but my own way. So it came very naturally to me to go to a course and do these new pieces with them. But it didn't stick with me. I didn't want to be a official part of Guitarcraft. I went to a few courses, but that was fine for me.
Do you play with a triangular pick?
I do.
Oh, which one do you use?
I'll show you.
For those who are curious, I'm holding up. This is the Robert Fripp. Let's see, Guitarcraft pick. It's a black triangle. This one is Delrin, so it kind of feels like the Dunlop Tortex Sharp, which I have here. But these two picks are not quite shaped the same.
Mm-hmm. Actually, what I do is I buy one of these Fender picks that are not triangular, but then I cut off the edges. You see that here? I cut off the edges of the pick.
Oh, that's one of the giant. They start really big, right?
They're fairly big, right? Yeah, and then I just cut off the edges here so that I get a triangular pick, and I use this here. So I've been using these for a long time.
For people who don't know, Stephan has this amazing series of CDs called Fractal Guitar, and I only have Fractal Guitar 3, 2, and then the 2 remixes. I couldn't find my Fractal Guitar 1 CD, but this is like a cornucopia of weird music, or at least weird musicians. You've got David Torn, Bill Laswell, Henry Kaiser, Andy West, Michael Manring, tons of Markus Reuter. It's just Barry Cleveland. There's so many great artists on these CDs. Can you tell us about Fractal Guitar, the approach, behind the music, and how you corralled all of these people into this effort?
Well, I was playing with Sonar for many years, and I sort of missed playing, with other people. And I had a lot of friends, that I met through the years, and especially with Markus. I was talking to Markus, and he said, "Well, why don't you do a solo record and invite all your friends and do whatever you want to do?" So that's exactly what I did. I called a drummer, and we started working on a piece, and then eventually I sent it to other guitarists, and they played their stuff. I thought it worked really well, having a track where everybody can do something, and I'll just take it home with me and edit what I think is good, and we get a piece in the end.
And I know you do a lot of work with Markus Reuter. And you guys have a new album out, Rothko Spaces Volume 2. What are those albums?
That's a different project. That's a project that started. The last Sonar record we did was with David Thorn, and we were in the studio, David and I, and we sort of decided to do a lot of stuff with feedback. So he was, he had his tube amps, and he was playing really loud and had got this wonderful sound. And he did a lot with feedback, and he played to the tracks that we had prepared for him. But then afterwards, I listened to what he played without the tracks that we had, and it was fantastic. And I sort of had the idea that I could add something completely different, which I did in strings. Gesundheit. So
thank you.
So I tried, I had these software with strings, and I tried adding strings, and I thought this was absolutely wonderful. And so I remembered, I always thought that Rothko, the painter, is like the perfect artist. What the way he did things, and the way he expressed his emotions, and the way the people reacted to his paintings. I always thought, that's like the perfect artist. So I was trying to do something to get similar effect that he gets with his pictures, with his paintings. And I always had, I don't know why, but I always had this idea in mind that it had to be an electric guitar with feedback and strings. Those two sounds, for me, create this atmosphere that reminds me, in a way, of a Rothko painting. And David had played this wonderful solo where he just keeps getting higher and higher, and that was the first piece that I did. And then I started doing other ones. Eventually, we got a whole album full. That was Rothko Spaces Volume 1. And I gave it to John Durant, a friend of mine, and we were talking a bit about it, and we sort of said, wouldn't it be a great idea to ask other guitarists to do that too? And not just have David Thorn on doing feedback, but other guitarists as well, because Markus, for instance, has a great possibility to work with feedback. So I asked Markus if he would like to do an album in a similar fashion, and he said yes. So we just met, and Markus played for, recorded 8 tracks or so. I took these home and did the same thing that I did with David's tracks. And that was Volume 2. And in the meantime, we have Volume 4. It's finished, so that will be out later this year. And there's also Volume 5 with David again. So it's really it's generated quite a lot of interest, because it's it's so different. It's looking at the guitar not so much in form of melody and harmony, but sound, pure sound. Feedback, distortion, what can you do with the guitar? And I think it's amazing the emotions you can create just with sounds. You don't need much else. If you know what I mean.
Absolutely. That's one of the wonderful things about the instrument, and why I think it's the best instrument in the world. Keyboards are wonderful. Because they can produce any sound, but to be in direct contact with the thing that makes the sound, the string,
right. Yeah.
And it's so portable. There's acoustic, electric. There's just so much variety. and then to
Yeah.
plug it in is just the most wondrous thing. I just feel the guitar is the most versatile and unlimited
Versatile, yeah.
instrument in the world. I love it.
I think so too. Yeah. Yeah, and there's no sound that I love more than a guitar with good distortion and good feedback.
Right?
Like David Thorne plays. He's one of the masters, I think.
I agree. So, something I find something interesting about the King Crimson fan circle, uh, and I put myself in that, and based on what you're saying, I'm putting you in as well. I've met a lot of King Crimson fans around the world, and many of them tend to be sort of engineering minded or mathematically minded. And
Mhm.
you have a degree in mathematics. I don't know if I remember, you have a PhD in math.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Tell us about your background in math, and then what do you see as sort of the coming together of the engineering mathematical mindset and music?
Yeah, I wouldn't over exaggerate the mathematical part. I mean, it frankly it doesn't have much to do with math. You know, the kind of math you do at the university is
Right.
so different. But I mean, it's arithmetic and it's the fascination with numbers. Of course, yeah. I'm very fascinated with numbers, and you know, I love to do things which have, you know, polyrhythms where you have different meters, and you know, the questions like when will they meet again and stuff like that. I mean, but it's basic math. I mean, it's not really advanced in any sense. So
Sure.
I wouldn't over exaggerate the math part. It's just an interest in structure, and you know, it works in one way because you know, when I was studying math, we were like 50 people in our group, and we once counted it was like 48 of those 50 were musicians, and not just, you know, hobby musicians, but really these people who were really playing music. So that way, a mathematician almost certainly will play music, but not the other way around. So if you go to a conservatory and ask the musicians how many of you like math, not many will say they do. So it works in one way. And for me, it was always just a natural interest in numbers and structures. And you know, if you like to compose things, you have to have mathematical considerations. There's no way you can do that without that. So for me, it's a very natural connection. But of course, I mean, if you listen to discipline, yeah, that's the fascination with numbers is there. You can hear that.
And what about where you sort of do away with the numbers with your ambient music? There's no time
Yeah,
signature, you know.
no,
Is
yeah.
that a response to something? You know, how do you approach ambient music in that sense?
Well, you're right. It has nothing to do with math. It's pure sound, and pure sound and pure emotions. And that's, I don't know if lately I've been more doing the ambient thing, but you know, when I do one thing, I miss the other. It's like, you know, it's both of the things are there, and I like both. But at the moment, I'm more into the ambient groove.
It's funny, I got to spend a day with Devin Townsend a few years
Yeah,
ago, and all day long he had ambient music playing.
really. Okay.
Watercolor, you know, visuals. He would find YouTube videos that are 8, 10 hours long of just. He said it was a guy falling asleep on the keyboard. That's what he wanted.
Okay.
And then in the
Okay.
meantime, you know, between when we were at his home and then when we went out to lunch, he took us for a drive, and we got to um, hear his new album
Mhm.
for the first time, and it was before it was out, and I just was like, it was so heavy and brutal, and I was like,
Mhm.
how is it that you spend all day listening to ambient music and then this comes out? And he said
Right.
it's a direct response.
Right.
I can't do that if I don't have the input of the ambient music.
Right.
and vice versa. Because I do this, I
Right.
need the ambient music. And then for
Yeah.
myself, I find I've got my engineering career, and then I've got the stuff that I do with the music. And the deeper
Mhm.
and more buried I get in the engineering work, the deeper I need to go with the music. And it's like the more productive I am over here, the more predictive I have to be on the other side to balance things
That's all
out.
right.
Do you
Right.
relate to
Yeah.
that?
Yes, absolutely. And I remember reading something from Brian Eno, where he said, when he lives in New York, he likes to do ambient music, and when he lives in the countryside, he likes to do punk or something, brutal, like you said. And I think that's a very natural thing that we look for, opposites in our life. We have one thing, and we want to do the exact opposite, but they need each other to compensate. I think I can relate very well to that. Yes.
Is this something that's sort of evolved in you, or has it always been there?
It's always been there. It's recently I just got interested in, you know, um, immersive kind of ambient. I would never listen to ambient, on the side, just something that's going on without paying attention, because I like to sit inside the music and really feel it, and that's what we're doing with the Rothko pieces. It's very tough music, actually. It's very it can be very harsh and brutal, but it's still ambient. It's still but it has all this feedback and distortion, and it can get pretty hairy, actually. But I like the experience of sitting inside the music, and that's why I'm interested in Dolby Atmos now, because you can do that. You sit there, and music is you're like in an aquarium or something. Music is all around you. And when I was in the studio last Saturday, I suddenly remembered that's exactly what I did when I was a kid. I went to the beach with my parents, and my parents would go into the water, and so I would just like to sit there and listen to the waves and the wind and the seagulls. I was in I lived in Santa Rosa when I was a kid, Santa Rosa, California, and we went to Bodega Bay, which is not far away. It's the Pacific Ocean, and I really loved just hearing these sounds. I could sit there for hours just listening and being immersed in these sounds, which float above you and all around you.
I've
It's something
never.
I yeah.
Go ahead, Stefan. I'm
No, no,
sorry.
no. So, say.
I've never really experienced Atmos or real immersive music beyond, a surround sound system in a movie
Right.
theater or something. But
Yeah. Right. Right.
like, how do you even mix in it? Because I know it's kind of the Atmos it has dynamic sort of architecture. It knows if you have
Mhm.
more speakers available, and like, how do you mix
Well,
Atmos music?
we were in a studio which has this 7.1.4 setup. That means you have seven speakers around you, four on the top and one subwoofer. And so you mix in that system. But the Dolby Atmos will just record this information and can render it to a different setup too. So if you only have five loudspeakers, it will render that to that format. But the way we listen to it in the studio is with seven speakers and four on top. And especially those on top, they make the difference. If you have stuff that's going up and comes from above, it's amazing. I didn't think so. With the first, I thought, well, music is music, and yes, stereo is great, but it's what's really surprised me is that it's so emotional. It's not just okay. It's the music. Let's say you're listening to something that you know well in Atmos. It's not just that. It's much more emotional. It really it hits you hard. For me, it did. It hit me hard.
funny. During Markus and I were doing a guitar clinic together in Argentina a few years ago, and somebody had asked the question about Adrian Belew being the emotional side of King Crimson and Robert being sort of the soulless creature, very Spartan.
But we
I
know
actually
that's not true. That's not true.
Well, I think
mean,
it's
Robert,
it's the opposite is actually true, where Robert is so emotional about music
right.
that he can start, welling up with tears, which he does in the King Crimson documentary. But like, I think that his response is like he has to control his emotions because he's so into it, which I don't think is what people normally see. But I'd love to hear your take on that.
Well, it's probably just the kind of personality that he is, and it certainly has to do with being an Englishman and growing up in that culture. But I personally think that I know no guitarist who can play so emotionally powerful than Robert Fripp. I mean, listen to Evening Star or things like that, which are really, he has so much soul in just one note. He can play one note and it can be so expressive. But of course, he has the other side where, he plays these polyrhythmic stuff and which he can do very well and very disciplined. He's a very disciplined person. But that doesn't mean that it's not emotional, not at all.
How come you haven't worked with him?
I met him a few times at the Guitar Craft course, and we got along well. And I wrote one piece that we played. I think he liked that. He smiled at me very, very brightly. But I don't know. It's not. I don't know. It's just not the same connection I had with other people, where it was more, natural for me to ask if they would like to do something with me. And I think Robert has his own stuff. He knows what he wants, and of course, he will do big projects with other people, but it never felt right for me to ask.
You have a new project that launched today.
Yes.
Can you share what it is and tell us about it?
Yeah, that was really fun. That was something I mentioned that David Thorne and I were experimenting with feedback. So when I started the project, I wanted to do something with David, where he would play guitar. But I also wanted to do something. I had been listening to My Life in the Bush of Ghosts by Brian Eno and David Byrne, and I wanted to do something, more rhythmic like that. And I mentioned this to a friend of mine who plays keyboards. And he said, "Oh yeah, that was one of his favorite albums too, and he would very much like to be a part of that project. And if we could do sampled voices, because he had a lot of ideas how to treat them." So I said, "Great," and we started working on tracks. And so the album is very upfront, they're very, very rhythmic, and lots of polyrhythms and lots of David Thorne weird sounds, and keyboards, 70s, 80s keyboards, and these sampled voices. So it's something very different for me, but I'm really happy with the result.
And if you're interested in buying that, dear viewer, you can check it out at stephanthelen.bandcamp.com. Project is called Worlds in Collision. It looks like it's an RSVP. Is it an event, or is it a CD, or what is it?
No, there's going to be a Bandcamp listening party next week, but the album is on download, CD, and LP. Yeah, double LP. Which a very nice. The cover looks very nice. I recommend getting the LP.
One of my favorite releases that you're on is Falling into Ascension, Sonar plus Markus, and Markus. I never got to interview him or anyone else about it. Can you tell us
Yeah.
about that album?
Yeah, Markus approached Sonar and asked us if he would do that with him. And there was also his friend Tobias Reber from Bern, who played synthesizers. So we met for one rehearsal. Markus showed us a few riffs and melodies, and then we went to the studio and just played these pieces. And Markus was telling us what to play, but it gave us a lot of freedom, to do whatever we thought was right. And it was a very fun day in the studio. And he took it home with him, and he made, he changed a lot of things in post production. So he was experimenting with lots of the stuff that we did, and he made it his album. But I like it a lot too. Yeah.
Some of it's very complex. It's surprising to hear that you just did it in a day.
Yeah.
uh,
It was one day.
how do you how do you approach this music? Because I, as a listener, even just the first track, da 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 da, da, I'm like, okay, I'm listening and I'm trying to like keep a pulse going and understand what is happening.
Mhm.
Uh, Obviously, you guys are very experienced and mature musicians, but there's got to be some element, unless you're just so well versed in this odd metered type of music. But are there challenges when you're doing this, and how do you put together a full album of complex music just getting together
Mhm.
for one day?
Well, like you said, it has a lot to do with experience, and I find that if you've been playing with polyrhythms for many years, you know how it works. You know what to how to. I mean, it's always in the beginning when you're learning something. It's always very important that you know where the pulse is, and you just stay in your space, because the other guy will do something which is completely against what you're doing, and if you start listening to him, you're off. So it's in the beginning, it's really just staying in your own zone, and then eventually you're so sure about what you have to play that you can start listening to what the other guys do, and then you get this sort of combined melody, combined things that I play and the things that the other guy will play, sort of create a new melody on top, and then you start hearing that, and then you're okay. So basically, I think it's a matter of experience. Polyrhythm. Recently I played with an ensemble which were learning a few of my pieces, and they had really a hard time, and they were like, desperate. Well, how they say that I've been playing music for 20 years. Why can't I play this? And it was exactly that problem. They could play their part, no problem. But as soon as the other guy would play, they're off. They're lost. So I had to tell them to really, you have to hear the pulse, even if nobody plays the pulse. You have to hear that, and then the whole group has to feel the same pulse. And if you can succeed in doing that, then it gets quite quite suddenly it gets quite much easier.
Any other secret trick tips or tricks?
I think that's the main one.
So you mentioned Rothko volumes 4 and 5, I think you said.
Right.
Are
Right.
should we expect, Fractal Guitar 4, 5?
Possible. I haven't done anything in that direction lately, but maybe I will. I don't know. At the moment, it's not planned. At the moment, I'm doing this. Well, I have the new album out, and we're also going to do another Fractal Sextet. Do you know about the Sextet?
I know a little about it, but I don't think
Yeah.
I've heard any of it yet.
Yeah. Okay. So the Sextet was like, we did the Fractal Guitar albums, 1, 2, 3, and then I was talking with John, and John said, "Wouldn't it be great to have a band? A real fixed band who could play this stuff?" And I said, "Sure, yeah." And then we got this group together called the Fractal Sextet. it's six people. You know, the drummer is from Israel, and the keyboarder is from Rome, and Colin Edwin, the bass player, is from London, and John is from the States, and I'm from Zurich, and the percussionist also. So it's really international band. And believe it or not, we have never met. You know, all six of us. It was all done over the internet. But for the next album, we actually want to meet and go to a studio and record there. So that's a big plan for me in the next year and a half to do that album. And like I said, the Rothko 4 and 5 will be coming out, and yeah, that's enough for me to do. And I also have the compositions which I'm doing for other ensembles, string quartets, and pieces for other instruments. So a lot to do.
You have quite the CD shelf behind you, collection of music.
Right. Yeah. That's totally new. I moved from Zurich to Bucharest a while ago, and in Zurich my CDs were everywhere. You know, in the cellar, and now I finally have one shelf where I can. But that's not all. That's about half of them. I have a lot more too.
What are the maybe the top 5 most surprising albums we might find on your shelves?
Surprising. I like a lot of stuff. I'm a big Steve Reich fan, as you could probably not surprised to hear. Yeah, King Crimson, but especially the old King Crimson. I like Brian Eno a lot. You know, that's maybe not so surprising. Let me think what could be surprising.
I actually did not know that about Steve Vai. I didn't know that you were a big fan of his.
No, Steve Reich. Sorry, not one. Steve Reich.
Okay, yeah, that's not surprising.
Americans say Reich, but in Germany you would say Reich.
Yeah, I've said that, and people have gotten on me. They're like, it's not like the Third Reich. I'm like, well,
yeah.
It is the same word.
It's the same word, yeah. Yes. No, Steve Reich. Yeah.
Okay, what might be out of the box? You know, what are some things that you listen to that might be unexpected?
Well, frankly, I don't listen that much to other music. I mean, I have a lot of CDs, but that's that was like 20 years ago when I was listening more to music. Let me think. Nothing really comes to mind, which would really surprise you. I listen to a lot of classical music. I love Shostakovich. I love Bartok. I also like Nick Bertsch. You know Nick Bertsch?
Very well. Yeah. We've hosted we've hosted him for concerts here three or four times. He's incredible.
Great. Yes. And I witnessed the beginnings of Nick's career. You know, when he was really not known and playing in little small clubs, and that was really great time. You know, when this all was very fresh and the ideas were coming, and that was a very, very adventurous time. So it was around 2000, something like that.
Excellent. Well, so when you, if you were to ask someone or tell someone where to start with your musical catalog, you know, how to get into Stephan Thelen, where would you suggest getting started?
Well, personally, I like the second Fractal Guitar album. I think you had it in your hands a while ago. That was the album that I did during COVID. You know, COVID was just starting, and I was just starting that album. And you know, I met my wife at that time, and we got 3 cats, and we were living at home, and it was such a lovely time for me. You know, it was really, and if I listen to that record, I have such good memories, and I think the record is so positive. You know, if I listen to today, it just sounds so amazingly positive, and that's what I love about that record. I mean, I love the other ones too, but yeah, that one. That I would maybe start there.
Mm. Tell
Or you
me.
could listen. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to ask just a little bit about. I'm good friends with Andy West, and I've done music
Yeah.
myself with Michael Manring. How'd you
Right.
get involved with the Henry Kaiser Andy West thing there? Because they're on the same track, and then I'd love to
Right.
hear Michael Manring's story.
Right. Um, well, a lot of people that I know go back to Anil Prasad. And Anil contacted me in the early days of Sonar. I don't know how he got to know Sonar, but he did, and he contacted me, and we became very good friends. And he visited me in Zurich, and I visited him in California. And he of course he knows everybody in the music world. So he made suggestions. Why don't you call this guy? Why don't you call this guy? And one suggestion was Henry Kaiser, of course, and one was Barry Cleveland, and a lot more as well. Kronos Quartet. He knew the Kronos Quartet very well, and he had heard one of my quartets, and he said they would be the perfect quartet for that. So he basically asked Kronos to listen to this, which they did, and then they commissioned a piece. So a lot of the things in my life, in my musical life, which where I had a little bit of success, is thanks to Anil. And Anil uh, set me up with Henry, and I think Andy is via Henry, yes, and Michael Manring is via Barry Cleveland, because they often played together in the past, or Barry knew Michael very well. So that was the second Fractal Guitar album, which you just held up, where Barry and I had done a piece together. Barry had also composed parts of that piece, and he wanted to do a remix, which is on the remix album. Yeah, right, that one. So there's a remix by Barry on that track, and he wanted to have Michael Manring on that track. So basically, it was his idea to get Michael into this project, and that's the only piece he plays on, I think.
Yeah, right. Fantastic. So thank you so much, Stephan. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's very late for you, and I'm grateful for you having a conversation with me.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well.